Ole Miss has the #1 recruiting class in the transfer portal right now with the huge additions of USC transfers, Jaxson Dart, the quarterback, and tight end Michael Trigg. And I don't think Ole Miss is going to let go of that. And this comes at a huge moment, an inflection point for Lane Kiffin's tenure there at Ole Miss. Just consider this. Let me set the table for you, all right? Ole Miss has lost 28 players here this offseason to the transfer portal or to the NFL draft. Those are players who left the team prematurely, early, before their expiration date, so to speak, with their eligibility. That includes, of course, Matt Corral, their top 3 running backs, their sacks leader, and their tackles leader. That's just scraping the surface. And you're looking at Matt Corral, who is going to go in the first round of this upcoming NFL draft and really redefine what to expect out of offenses from Ole Miss and under Lane Kiffin. We've seen tremendous performances under Lane Kiffin, record-breaking even offensive performances from a quarterback. But Matt Corral did something different. He did it consistently, game to game, week to week at Ole Miss, and really elevated that program to being able to win 10 games for the first time in school history. But can they maintain that with as big of an exodus as they've had with the 28 players leaving, including Matt Corral? It makes you wonder. But here's the other big thing. I wrote about this at 24/7 Sports. They also lose their top coordinators, their 2 coordinators, I should say. Jeff Levy went to OU. DJ Durkin went to Texas A&M. Lane Kiffin also lost his right-hand man in the back office, his general manager, and he lost his head strength coach. All went to different schools. So Lane Kiffin, in a period of really these last 3 weeks, has had to deal with all of this since their Sugar Bowl loss to Baylor. All those players leaving, all those coaches leaving, all those important front office personnel. In this day and age, with college football the way it is, you need a general manager, like in the NFL, to run your program and sees things just as you do as the head coach and communicates that to the entire program. Lane Kiffin had that. Then he left. But here's what Lane Kiffin did. He made a fantastic hire, getting the former LSU GM to join him, and then said, I'm going to hit the transfer portal hard and fill these spaces that I've got to do on offense and defense. And boy, has he done it. And to me, this Ole Miss squad goes from being an obvious team that's going to be in rebuilding mode and outside the top 25 to maybe being in reload mode, which is insane to think with Ole Miss, and especially when Ole Miss loses it's seemingly a generational player for them in Matt Corral and 27 other players and their 2 coordinators. But Kiffin has built this thing to be able to sustain itself because of the transfer portal. Let's listen to this. He's got 10 players committed already through the transfer portal. Guess how many of them are 4-star or 5-star players? 7. 7 of the 10 are 4 or 5-star players. That is insane. Insane. And Jaxson Dart is going to change things for them. Why? I took a look at the numbers with some help from SEC StatCat. By the way, follow them on Twitter and check out their website if you haven't. They do fantastic work, and they really go inside the numbers, but also break down film unlike anybody else, including Pro Football Focus, which I really respect. But SEC StatCat, when it comes to SEC teams, these guys do phenomenal work. Anyway, a little shout out to them. But what they found was really interesting to me. Matt Corral dealt with a lot of injuries throughout his career, especially this past season. And he had a historic year, was even a guy that a lot of us were thinking would maybe be a Heisman Trophy finalist. But because of those injuries, the offense had to change a little bit. Lane Kiffin had to change things up and almost create some crutches, some makeshift crutches offensively for Matt Corral to be more successful than he maybe would have usually been. What did he do to do that? He started using more RPOs and more drop back play action passes. In fact, because of those injuries, they went to that so often, 76% of his snaps, of his pass snaps, I should say, were RPOs or drop back play action passes. Ole Miss was 5% higher in running RPOs than any other team in the SEC. The second best second highest, I should say, was Arkansas, which utilizes RPOs like crazy under Kendall Briles. But that shows you that they had to rely on some different things and some quick thinking to not necessarily run plays that not necessarily predetermined, but that weren't really fitting what Matt Corral could do because of his injuries. Why is that an issue going forward? Simply put, not a lot of quarterbacks have that kind of it factor that can shake off injuries, go out there and battle, do some of these RPOs, some of these other things that really spreads the ball out a little bit and gets the ball out of their hands quickly compared to other quarterbacks, especially the quarterback who was going to replace Matt Corral before Jaxson Dart came in. That guy, Luke Altmaier, we saw a little bit of in the Sugar Bowl against Baylor, and he put up okay numbers, but they weren't great. 3-1 touchdown in that 20-7 loss. But he wasn't consistent. He's not the type of guy that's going to give you a great passer rating. Someone who's very consistent, goes beyond just, being 17 of 24 or something like that passing. He just doesn't have it. He doesn't have that Matt Corral factor, and he also doesn't have that just elite arm talent that's going to be able to come, get away with some things or not necessarily have to be leaning on that it factor with his own talent. Luke Altmaier, this past season, in his limited action, including what was pretty much a start in that Sugar Bowl because he played for 3.5 quarters, 10.4% of his passes were interceptable, meaning that they were in danger of being picked off. 1 out of 10 of his passes were in danger of being picked off, according to SEC StatCat, which is an astronomical rate from a quarterback in the SEC. You obviously do not want that. So you bring in Jaxson Dart, number 3, I believe, in the 24/7 Sports transfer rankings, 5-star kid, started 3 games at USC this past season, had some injuries himself, played in 6 games, but obviously has some elite arm talent that is going to not necessarily maybe match what Matt Corral was able to do as far as just the exciting electric plays, escaping the pocket, running around people and all that. But Jaxson Dart's going to give you someone who's probably maybe a little bit more talented at this point in his career than Matt Corral. And with him coming in over Luke Altmaier, that gives Ole Miss an opportunity here to pick up where Matt Corral left off and actually maybe be more creative offensively because he's a little bit more talented and hopefully for Ole Miss's sake will not be limited as much as Matt Corral was by injuries. I can't stress enough how big of a pickup this was for Lane Kiffin and for that Ole Miss football team. Not only that, but you got 10 newcomers coming in, 7 of which are 4 or 5-star kids. But I think outside of the big get with Jaxson Dart, which have been rumored forever and we've all been obsessing over, the big get for me is Zach Evans, the former running back at TCU, a 5-star kid previously out of high school, only had, I think, 92 carries this past season. But Ole Miss loses their top 3 running backs, but they haven't really had that, that every down back in a few years. Listen, Snoop Connor was a lot of fun to watch, but he wasn't a guy that was just going to ground and pound you to death when you needed to, and then also have that explosiveness in the open field. But Zach Evans could change that. And again, I'm not saying Ole Miss's offense was simplistic this past year. It obviously wasn't, but you can become a little bit more dynamic with a running back like Zach Evans and a little bit more dynamic, honestly, at quarterback with Jaxson Dart. And of course, adding Michael Trigg at tight end, which, to be honest, is going to be like having another receiver out there. He's just going to be a receiver. He's not really a tight end. Tight ends aren't tight ends anymore in college football. They're pretty much just receivers that line up inside. But this Ole Miss team is setting itself up because of the transfer portal to be a top 25 team this upcoming season, which might not sound like a big deal because I think a lot of people just kind of assume that because of Lane Kiffin and the dynamic offense he's had over the years. But they lost a lot of guys. And at Ole Miss, you don't simply just reload. But because of the transfer portal, because of Lane Kiffin as a recruiter, he's been able to do that despite losing all these coaches and all these players. This is something really to watch going into spring football. In fact, this is probably one of the more interesting spring practices coming up in Oxford. I can't wait to hear what we hear and what we see out of Ole Miss with Jaxson Dart and all these new players coming on campus, because not only are they replacing a lot of good bodies there on offense with some great kids, but also on defense. So this spring could really tell a lot about what we're going to see from Ole Miss next season. And a lot of spring football practices are throwaways for schools. This won't be for Ole Miss. This is actually going to be quite exciting. I can't wait to see it, and I hope you guys followed it as well.